Hello and welcome everyone to Season 2 of Soul and Science, where psychology meets ancient wisdom. Our theme this month for Season 2 is From Victim to Victor, the podcast where we explore the transformative journey of healing and personal empowerment. Through inspiring stories, insights, and practical tools, we'll guide you from a place of victimhood to victory, from unconscious patterns to conscious, empowered living. Whether you're navigating trauma, striving for personal growth, or simply looking for a deeper understanding of how to reclaim your power, this will give you an insight and a few tools to help you on that journey. Join me, Nyana, a psychotherapist, and Ardaas, a spiritual teacher, as we dive deeper into the connection of mind, body, soul, and its incredible ability to heal and rise and elevate. While this may not be a therapy session, and we invite you to seek professional advice where needed, this may allow you to get closer to understanding where you have been stuck in the past and how you can be reborn to be victorious. Hello and welcome everyone to Soul and Science, a podcast where psychology meets ancient wisdom. I am Nyana, and of course we are with Ardaas ji, our spiritual teacher, coach, guide, and our teacher of ancient wisdom. Today, in our episode 4 of season 2, which is the journey from victim to victor, in episode 4, we're going to talk about the unholy alliance, the thoughts and emotions entangled by trauma. And we're going to talk about and go as deep as we possibly can today to explain how traumatize our thoughts and emotions together and the impact it has on our lives in the way it even affects our perceptions, the role of and the journey of healing, and everything lovely in between. So over to you, Ardaas ji. Do you have any beginning thoughts on how trauma and involves the entanglement of thought and emotion?
Yes, hello, Satnam, and thank you, Nina, for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and I'm glad that you are here listening to us. So, okay, I'm having a few thoughts about this to start away. I was thinking how the first time I was researching understanding, what is understanding, and I found that from the psychology, and now I'm going to talk about psychology, but I'm going to come back to yoga very quickly. How there is that, like, these three levels of understanding. There is a cognitive understanding, there is an affective understanding, and then there is a psychomotor, like the body, like the physical body, like learning to ride a bike. And we move between the cognitive and the affective, meaning how we think and how we feel. And we move between these two, and sometimes they are disconnected and sometimes they are connected. We may think about something and we may think we want to do something, but then the feelings inside may reveal something else. That could happen. And this alliance, and what we call in this episode the Unholy Alliance, is when the cognitive and the affective join together, but in a way that is detrimental to us. So think of it, let's think about the opposite for a moment. When we have a nice experience, a beautiful experience, and that we are receiving all sorts of positive emotions within us, it is much more likely that we're going to remember that experience. And that if we are studying something, we're going to remember something. That's why when we tell, we talk about education and we talk about teaching children things, and if you create the right environment when they're going to be in a positive attitude and they're going to have some good positive feelings, they are going to remember much better whatever you are doing. Mm-hmm. And considering that, at the end of the week, how much of the week do we actually remember? It's actually very little. And those things which we remember are often associated to some emotional impact of the experience. There was some emotion linked to that experience. If the emotion is positive, then it will be recorded, but if the emotion is negative, it will also be recorded. And this is where we go into the patterns of survival and all these mechanisms that we have been talking about for the last episodes, about how trauma originates because the body tries to survive. And if we have a bad experience, an experience in which we come out of it with the feeling that we were in danger in some way, we want to remember that so that we can avoid it in the future, so that we can survive and our species can survive. So the design is made so that the brain is going to remember those experiences which are very negative so that we can avoid it. But yeah, that makes it so that, yeah, it's great that we can avoid it, but at the same time, you remember it and then you remember it and then you remember it, and it becomes part of your memory that you may revisit again and again. And every time you revisit the memory, you may be re-triggering that the stress associated to that situation that you survived, thankfully, but now you are reliving it with stress, and that's how trauma kind of starts. So was kind of like the connection between this alliance. But I wanted to point out that the other side as well. So when the emotions are, let's say, positive, to put a label to them, then that's also going to be recorded, and that's also going to have a strong imprint within us. So whether they are negative or positive, it's just a charge. And when the emotions are charged, those thoughts are going to be more imprinted. The problem to us, it gets when that charge is negative and it's difficult to escape the pattern that is created. And then we think something might happen because maybe we are afraid that something could happen. Let's say we are meeting, let's say we feel lonely and we think about getting a partner. And then when we think about the prospect of getting a partner, we remember some painful experience from the past. And that painful experience arises some emotions from the past. The emotions being negative drags us into that experience as we were the last time that it happened. And then we get even more fearful, and the thoughts become more worrying and more cloudy. And then those thoughts, more worrying and cloudy, become even more emotional. Then we become more emotional. So it's like a wheel that goes deeper and deeper, and they make an alliance between these, the thoughts and the emotions, and it's hard to get out of. So this is kind of like the basis for my first initial thoughts on today's topic.
Thank you for sharing that, Ardaas. Before I go into trauma, I'm going to take the first thing that you began with, which is that you have a thought, and then there is a feeling that comes up that may not be aligned to that thought, right? And that feeling may be that, hey, I actually don't want to do that. But sometimes we don't listen to that feeling. Sometimes it's also a gut feeling that's saying something to us, to the thought, and saying no. And that sometimes listening to that can be our natural state of learning to listen to our feelings and the sensations in the body, which is actually healthy. But when there is that entanglement of thought and emotion that occurs, when trauma comes into the picture, we're not able to fully hear the space between that, between the thought and the emotion, and that we start believing more on the thought, because that's really about making meaning. How do I survive? Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? So that I never feel a certain other emotion ever again. So there is an event. So today, interestingly, I had many clients, and the focus came on this trauma around a lot of physical violence in the family, and this belief that if I went to my parents then and asked for something, they would get angry, and so I was afraid of that anger. And so I began to believe that my needs are a problem, that I can't go and have needs, my needs are a burden and they are trouble. And that is trauma as well, right? Neglecting our needs, not listening to our needs, and that also comes into not listening to the needs of the body, and that kind of is a different pathway to trauma. But this was really interesting, and I bring this in here because we always think of trauma as being something large, but this might be an interesting space to take into, which is my basic need for my needs to be seen, and that if this is all this happening, might be addiction. In this case, I was in addiction, a lot of parenting, fighting, that the needs of the child's need for safety, survival, connection, attunement was always like, can't you see I'm busy? Or parents were too fighting and the child took away. That the only way I can survive is to not show that I have needs. And so every time there is a need, then the thought is that needs are bad, so I suppress it more. And that becomes an unholy alliance again of the journey of trauma relating to creating survival-based patterns that say the only way to survive is to not have needs. And so I get disconnected from my emotion and I start living in the thought. And then the thoughts become larger, sometimes bigger, too many thoughts, and there is then finally no space between thoughts, and it's one thought after another, and I'm ruminating, and that just becomes a natural wiring of my brain into my unconscious, and then I'm doing other things to feel into not feeling too many, not having too many thoughts in my head, so I start distracting, which is something that we've talked about in other sessions and conversations in the past. But just getting into how these events growing up can wire us to believe that something about me is unsafe, and that the trauma doesn't always have to be something big. And this is where the belief then releases this thought that then releases an emotion, and then I get stuck in that entanglement of running away from my own self and my own feelings.
Yeah, you just mentioned the thought releases that emotion, and you were talking about the gap before, but the thing is that gap is so little as well. We have a thought, and immediately that thought turns into feelings and emotions and needs and the reaction that we do out of those. So I can see how it's hard to differentiate one from the other, because you're having the thoughts, but all these emotions are right below the surface. And even if we sometimes don't feel them, like you're saying, sometimes we escape from the emotions and we become much more in the mind. But the emotions are in the background, or maybe they are numbing. Yeah, they are just like a fear to confront myself with what is in there. Fear is already an emotion, and so I numb my feelings, my any other feeling and emotion, because of afraid of to go there. I don't even want to go there because I don't know what is there. So I close the door to the subconscious, no? And this is like in the house, that nasty room that you close the door and it's all dark. And when you leave something dark for a long time, there's all these vermin running around, and the critters and monsters, right?
Yeah.
Then there is the skeletons in the closet and so on. So we avoid it, and we avoid feeling that, so we numb ourselves to that. And that's why the process of healing, having to go and heal also what is in there, in those hidden closets, is going to imply some form of pain. To get out of that numbing, the moment that you start removing that numbing, you start facing what is there, and there's going to be pain associated to that.
Yeah, and I think what's it's important in my own journey of understanding is that what we make pain mean, and we make pain mean that there is something wrong with me, that I'm a bad person, I have bad karma, I am being punished, and that sometimes exacerbates, most of the time, all the time, exacerbates the pain and creates more numbing, instead of us having the ability to look at it and say, is that like, let me understand this a little bit more. Let me really see, is that the truth? Is that the whole truth? Or is that an interpretation or a perception that I created when I was younger to make sense of what was happening? And so unknowingly, when these are things are happening, the human experience is to make sense. That's the role of the ego and the mind, right? It's always meaning making, it's always doing that. And when we're younger, all we can really care about is two things: survival and getting our needs met. And then we have ego development happening at the same time. And then if I'm not receiving that security, stability, attunement, safety, if my environment isn't safe, then I'm unconsciously creating, as a child, meaning to the situation. And that then becomes a part of my identity. My personality begins to fear that I'm this bad child, therefore this is happening. And then in order to deal with that, I am developing coping mechanisms to never be bad. So I become this really good child, or I become a people pleaser, or I become an, different a personality that's always, overcompensating, for example. And that creates more pain and more, because it's not who I am. Yeah, I'm overcome. I'm trying to become someone that I'm not, even though my natural state is pure love and innocence, and our essence, our true self is already all of those. Now we have a true self that isn't mirrored, but we have a belief that is bad, and now we're compensating for that belief for the rest of our lives, and then trying to prove that we're actually good, and that just becomes the life's journey. And that's really the pain entanglement that we get stuck in, which then becomes suffering. Because how do I get out of this story of mine that I created that was trying to make sense about all of this? And then my whole life becomes developed around never feeling that pain ever again. That level of pain. And then the numbing starts, and then the journey of life becomes about pain avoidance. um, because of all these beliefs and stories. And how are we pain avoiding? Whether it's distractions, whether it's a creation of a personality that is self-sacrificing, or not in a healthy way. Self-sacrifice has a healthy way as well, but in an unhealthy way, or denying our needs, or denying that we exist when and we hope or addictions, for example. These are all ways in which we're trying to cope with these multiple layers of pain avoidant techniques and coping mechanisms that we develop based on feedback that we receive, or feedback that we don't receive in childhood, when we are creating that sense of ego development. I see your face is quite interested and quizzical in this moment. And what would you like to say, Ardaas?
Yes, I'm having a philosophical idea coming somehow. I'm just going to explore it, okay? I haven't developed it too much, but let me just say how I'm hearing what you are saying. It's going to be a bit hard to put into words, but well, first of all, we already talked about pain and suffering. I think it was on the first episode, and how those are different, two different things, right? And pain is necessary. There is pain when we are born. There's pain. There's growing pains as we grow. Then there's pain in many aspects of life that if we try to avoid it, because our survival mechanisms are there to design so that we can survive, and if something is painful, it might be dangerous, so we want to avoid pain, then that same mechanism is going to make us avoid growing pains. And so it wants us to stay the same. That's the comfort zone, and that's not improving your life, first of all. But then as you were talking, I was questioning myself, what is true? Which is something we explored in the previous season. Yeah? Last year, there was one episode we talked about truth, but today I'm having a different angle to that, which is none of those emotions are really truth. They are not the truth. They are not our truth, and they are not expressive of our truth, of who we truly are, let's say. There is a certain truth in the expression of feelings, of emotions, in the sense that that's part of me. That's one of the parts of my animal me, my emotional mind is expressing how we feel, and that may be true in that sense. But that's only one layer Yeah, emotions is just the affective side. It's just the affective layer, which is not truly myself, not my true essence.
Mm.
When I'm thinking about the self or the soul, if you wish, or the spirit. So emotions are not the self. They might be an expression, and in that sense, they could be true, and we can check that. But by themselves, that's not who I am, my essence. So that's one thing. The other thing is thoughts. Okay, thoughts. Thoughts. Well, I'm not my thoughts. That's also not me. So thoughts lie. And in fact, in Spanish, we say, la mente miente. La mente miente, which means that the mind lies.
Mm.
Right? The mind and lies, the word is so very similar, just one vowel in between. And that's what the mind likes to do. But it's just a quality of the mind. It's not to say anything bad against it. The mind likes to lie, meaning also when we are fantasizing, when we are imagining a future, when we are imagining something that we could be doing, that's also lie. We are not doing that, but that imagination could be very useful to us. I'm not saying it's not useful. Yeah, but the quality of the mind is just imagining something, fantasizing about something. And that could also be when we are remembering life. Well, we know that we change a lot our memories, no? From what really happens to what we remember, there can be a big difference. And then as we remember whatever happened, then we again rewrite the history. So mind lies. So my thoughts are not the truth, and my emotions are not the truth. So the question is, what is that truth, right? And we want to tune in to that truth. And by going deeper into the thoughts and the emotions, that's not going to be the answer to find the truth.
Mm.
Okay? All right. So what do we do? Well, thoughts and emotions are part of us, like particularly the mind. No, the you could say emotional mind if you wish. No, it's not just the mind; it's something else. But okay, let's talk about thoughts and emotions. Okay, it's part of me, like a tool that I can use. But when I say part of me, that's the me that I would say the truth. Okay, that the true essential me has this mind, has these emotions, has this physical body and whatever it can do. So that's something that I can utilize from the truth within me. I can utilize the mind to, like right now we are doing, exploring an idea, thinking about it, and trying to reach to some conclusion and trying to decide something and help us to connect with the teachings and help us to connect to the truth. So the mind can help to connect to the truth. The mind itself is not the truth, but we can use it as an instrument. Okay, emotions the same. Emotions are not the truth by themselves, but it's a layer of us. It's an important layer of us, and we can tune into that, and we can utilize that energy that is contained within those emotions to what we say in yoga, fuel our devotion. So from emotion to devotion, we say. So if we are feeling sad, we can take that sadness as an expression of our feeling of separation from our soul.
Mm.
And so when I feel sad, I am separated from that truth within me. And so the sadder I feel, I can utilize that energy to move me into the desire to go and meditate,
Mm.
for example. So it can be a fuel to move in the direction of the truth. And as I was contemplating this, like very abstractly as you were speaking, then you were talking about pain. And then I thought, well, actually, pain is the closest thing to truth. Because when we are, let's say we are distracted, and then there is some pain that manifests, even physical pain, yeah? The moment that we have real pain, then we wake up. We come out of our fantasy. We come out of whatever our mind was imagining, and whatever we were in a hole of the emotional. We were sad. You know, you may be sad, but suddenly somebody steps on your toes. You're gonna be in pain. Now you're awake, so you
Mm.
come out of that hypnosis that you may be trapped by this unholy alliance, and for a moment you are right there. So there is pain and you are alive. You are here. You are present. You are conscious. Then immediately we may go into a reaction. Why did you step on my toes? And then you get angry, emotions again. And then we react, and the mind thinks, who is this person that just steps on my toes? And then we start going through this whole drama of life. But the moment the pain was there, it told us for a moment, wake up. And that moment was true because you were truly awake, even though we immediately, just in an instant, we go back into the unholy alliance. But I was just contemplating this pain linked to truth beyond the thoughts and emotions. How do you hear this?
It totally lands. Totally lands, right? But I'm going to take a little bit from the psychology to meet you, since psychology meets ancient wisdom in soul and science. That we do say that the thoughts aren't the truth, and that we recognize that they're thoughts, and thoughts lead to emotions, and thoughts also represent our unconscious beliefs, and sometimes we're not aware of our thoughts, they're just coming, it's just automatic all the time. And but when it brings emotion, right, um, the emotion could be sadness, disgust, fear, anger, sometimes a mix of all of this. But emotion, if you bring awareness, is also the journey to waking up, because it's bringing you to something in you that needs to be seen and made aware. And it's usually a lie about ourselves, that I'm not good enough, or this happened to me because I'm a bad person, or that's causing this pain or sadness or fear or whatever. Essentially pain, most people say, even when they're scared, the first thing they say is, I don't know what I'm feeling, and then they'll say there's fear, and there's more than fear, there's sadness, there's this, there's that. And any form of emotion, we believe, is bringing your awareness to something. And that's something, when explored, which
Well,
is
it has the potential to bring you aware of something. Not
bring.
necessarily. You can get trapped in an emotion and it doesn't serve your soul.
No, it doesn't. Not just as neither does pain. You can get trapped in the pain
Yeah.
and it doesn't serve the soul. This is the same way. There is a certain underlying assumption here that you're doing it in a way that is with the intention of exploring it, bringing an inquiry to understand what is the cause of the pain. Is there an underlying belief, and is that the truth? And the truth is it a reflection of, is it the true me? No, as in therapy we call it the true self. And if it is not, then it's bringing me closer to my essence. That means I'm doing away with the barriers that I've created in my life that are untruths, to bring me closer to my essence. So if I'm not good enough, then what am I, or who am I?
Well, I agree, but in a certain way. I don't think automatically it's going to bring you closer to your essence. I think
But
there,
that's the
there's
journey of therapy. That's the journey of the healing process, where you are then working with a therapist, or and working with the concept of the observer, allowing yourself to witness what's happening. And that's the whole therapeutic journey, which we're really not going into the depths of it. But the intent of emotion or pain is to bring your awareness to something that is not at ease in yourself, that it's not sitting with you. And if you were to give it the awareness that it needs, then you may unravel something that could bring you closer to your essence.
Mhm. Well, I'm thinking how sometimes we may inquire into a certain emotion and we are feeling an emotion and then we go into it and we explore it and there is a way to do that that it's unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
and that is not going to bring us any closer to truth. So how do you recognize within therapy the difference between like feeding the drama and actually cleansing it so that we can get closer to the true self?
So there are a couple of ways. The first is defining an emotion with a feeling, that I think we've done in the earlier season. which is to most people say, I feel like I'm not good enough. Well, that's not a feeling. What is the emotion it brings up when you perceive? So we separate the feeling from a perception. And to recognize that I'm perceiving this, it's an interpretation, it need not be the truth. And so when we are separating that for the person, then we're saying, if that is not the truth, what are the other possibilities? Why might that have happened to somebody? Example, I got bullied, which means I'm a wuss, I'm weak, etc., that we make up, or and then we go into the understanding of, okay, what might be the other possible reasons or interpretations of what happened. So it means this is not the truth. And so then we rework that. If we have certain questions, that we then delve into possible other interpretations and belief systems, which means untangling the story from the emotion, from my identity, who I've made myself believe that I am, and to really question, is it the truth or not? And there is this opening of awareness of the observer, the witness, that says, no, actually, no. It's not true that this child or this I am not good enough. This happened for XYZ reasons. That may be on them, or it's their behavior, and what I could have done maybe differently, but that isn't also true for me today. And then we get into actually rephrasing the belief and changing the narrative or changing the story for the individual of what may have seemed a perception before, what was the reality, and what is the truth in that belief in this moment. And that's really the journey of the exploration, holding the attunement, compassion, and safety for the client to explore for themselves, even why that belief may be something we still hold on to. Or how does it serve me to continue to be in a victim story? Because I probably don't have any other identity. Who would I be without this story, for example? And that allows that space for exploration to occur with safety, and allowing the person to know that I'm still choosing to hold on, and that's okay too. Right? Until we are closer to recognizing or connecting to this observer, and being clear that, okay, I'm this observer, this witness that can witness, and I'm not this story. Or I'm not that 12-year-old child anymore who experienced those things and made this. Today, as an adult, I'm able to observe that that is not true about this child. And that's when we're able to really...
Can you give a concrete example?
So, for example, today I had, for example, a session where a kid said, or a young adult said, that their parents were fighting. So at a young age, at 5, they interpreted it as, because they were fighting, it must be because they don't love me, and they don't love me because I'm not good enough. And so till now, there's a lot of anxiety and shame because they keep believing that they are not good enough. And so when we went into the body of the emotion of the fear, the narrative showed up, this experience and event showed up, and we sort of explored as to why might these parents be fighting. And is it true that there were multiple reasons, and so therefore is it true that therefore the child is not good enough if the parents are fighting? And the witness was able to see that no, that isn't true. But I made it mean that about me, and what might have been the reasons, and how did it help the child survive, which is not really helping them now with this belief. And that how they have been sort of using the last whatever number of years trying to prove that they are good enough, and how much they've overcompensated, etc., and therefore the fear of failure and whatever else that came with it. And that stayed with the individual, that yeah, that's the interpretation, and I made it mean something about me because that's what children do, but that's not true. There were other reasons why they didn't mean anything about me. And that is a space where an example of what we do to hold space and empathy for the person to explore that for themselves, their narrative, and to say, okay, fine, do I still want to hold on to this narrative? How is it serving me today? You know, and who would this person be, and how would he be if the person showed up knowing that they were good enough? What would that look like for the individual? And that becomes a possibility, and we're suddenly looking at, oh, it's a perception versus reality. And then that becomes an individual's journey over time to really recognize, wait, am I perceiving this? Is this the truth, or is this a belief? And who would I be without this belief? So, and that essentially opens up the space for possibility to look at oneself differently with a different pair of eyes, closer to the true self, closer to our authenticity, closer to experiencing oneself without that belief.
Right. So I hear a lot about this. Everything you are saying is very much connected to the concept of mind games, as we say in yoga. No, there's this all these mental games that the mind likes to play, and we get caught up in. There's a good number of them. We talked about this last season as well. We did, I think it was the first episode, and how we get trapped in those mind games, which are things that we get identified with, like the victim you were just saying, no? As an interpretation of whatever happened. I wonder when there is no such an interpretation so clearly. Let's say a child, maybe the father goes away, he leaves the family, right? Abandons the wife and the child and goes away. And then some years later, the mother dies, and the child ends up being brought up by somebody else, maybe within the family, but some closer relative. And within the child, there is this feeling of abandonment. Now, he was abandoned in some ways, in some level, right? His father left, and his mother was gone as well,
Yeah, so we look at that as a perception of abandonment.
right?
Okay, so that's the story that I was abandoned, and that's a perception. And the perception of that story, it's not a feeling, it's a perception. What is that? What emotion does that bring up?
Are you saying that that perception is not true?
The father left. Does it mean that person was abandoned, like I was abandoned? The father left. That's the fact. That's the reality. Now I'm adding
Mm-hmm.
an interpretation on top of that. That is that I was abandoned. Or
Good.
that's somewhere a judgment, right? Or an interpretation that I'm adding on top of the of what actually happened,
Right.
right? And that's where we separate the two. And then we say, okay, when you perceive that the person abandoned you, what does that make you feel? And there's sadness, and what did you make that mean about you? That I'm unworthy of love, for example, or everybody abandons, or I can't trust anyone, right? And so those are the layers of perception where we come to the truth that actually the truth is the father left. That's it, right? And that interpretation, story, etc., is where the entanglement and all of that begins. And we try to sort of separate the two to come to as close to the pure truth that is, and what you made that mean about some this the father leaving, right? Is it true that therefore that you're not lovable, or that everyone will leave you? Because then that's what interpretation we again create, and we start living that as the truth and reality. And that is the journey where we kind of take away, because then if when I start living with these interpretations as the truth and reality of my story, I'm living with defense walls. I'm always defending, I'm always afraid, I'm not living as my true self. I'm always navigating through this lens, which is a colored lens in a lot of ways.
Yes, I agree with what you are saying. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, that we have our own interpretation of whatever happened, and that's the color lens through which we see the world. Sure, for sure. But I want the yogic perspective is also a little bit wider in the terms that, well, two things, two more ingredients to this very same example. Okay, one is everything is karma, right? Everything that happens to us is our karma, and two is we choose our parents. So whatever that, which is a hard thing to accept for many people, yeah, to accept that our soul in some way, there is some intelligence guiding it and chose to be born in that family when somehow we don't know how, because it's a really magical thing, but somehow you know that your father is going to go away when you are 3 years old. Yeah, there is this karma within you to lose your father when you are a baby or child, very, very small child, and then you're going to lose your mother a few years later. So let's say that's your karma. And so you choose the family in which the the mother, your mother has this karma to die young, and then the father has this karma of whatever it is that makes him go away. So in a way, we can approach it the way you are saying. Well, nobody really abandoned you, they just left, and you can interpret it like you are not worthy of love, and maybe you are distrust people because whoever you love, they're going to go away and things like that. That's one layer, and it's true, and that's an interpretation. But there's another layer, which is it happens. It happened. Those people came that you came into their life, and then they were gone, and those were the closest people in your life, your father and your mother. So we can try to reinterpret it in different ways. We can try to reframe it and change the narrative I have around it, but there is no escape from that reality, which is that those people left. So is there a way to understand this to understand this karma in a different way? So not to try to change, well, I mean, the narrative is important and what I say to myself about it, but it's also about to look at it more in a more wider perspective, or more cosmic perspective, if you wish. I don't know. Does it make sense?
Yeah, but we don't bring the karmic theory into our sessions because I don't think it's fully and deeply understood in the same way. So what we can do, nobody's taking away the event. Nobody's saying it didn't happen. What
Yeah.
we're saying is that it does not mean anything personal about you, that you are unworthy of love, or this happened because you're a bad person, or that and that's where we are creating, because yeah, I can go into the ex, why the father left. Who's going to know, right? So the point is to allow the child to hold space for the emotion of what that felt like to not have to grow up without having the parent, the grief, the sorrow, the sadness, even what I made that mean about me, and to hold that space, not taking away the event, but not making it mean that you were abandoned, or because that would mean, going into, therefore, this person is bad and that's a judgment. We're not going into that. We're steering away from that to hold space for what that experience created for the client and how it affects their life today, how it's in the way of who they are today, and how we can create some semblance of peace and acceptance of that what happened to them was not because they did something, which is what most children do, that I did something wrong, it's my fault. And that's what we need to take away. And that's really what the psychology based therapy does, because we don't bring in so much of karma. And sometimes karma as a theory gets in the way of people's recovery, because we just assume that I did bad things, and so bad things are going to happen to me, and I'm a
Right.
bad
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
yeah.
Because if we include the law of karma within the conversation, then then yes, it's very easy to go into thinking, well, I lost my mother because I did something wrong in the past or in another life, and that's why I'm being punished in this lifetime. So that can very easily go that way.
Yeah.
And then
And
how do you deal with that?
um, uh, I mean, different ways. We either go into, you know, the same way actually, about either if they want to talk about karma theory, then we kind of talk about that. We give space to hold space what they have understood, where they may have taken it from. If they want to go back and read some more, ask some more questions. But also, if that was not their interpretation, how would they show up in the world? Right? And to know that um, there's space for us to navigate it through the karmic lens, or which we don't know enough about, or we have the thing to really look at, okay, even if it is, and does it mean that you are a bad person?
Right. Is the secondary meaning that you give to the experience that you want to challenge? The
Well, challenge, just
what it
bring
says about you.
yeah, we want to bring conscious awareness to the meaning that we are creating and whole space to really say that the pain is really that we are rejecting ourselves. The pain is really that we are not accepting ourselves, that we are hating on ourselves, we are rejecting, and then we're expecting, and we're showing up in this world in a defended way with all these walls, right? And that and it's coming from this space of interpretations and meanings that we have made, which if we were to give some awareness, consciousness to, could there be other interpretations, right?
Yes.
What
Mm.
would that mean if we were willing to look at it from a different perspective, if we had multiple possibilities, and then from here the client gets to choose, okay, what would you like to take, what would you like the narrative of the story or the belief to be then, and how might you show up in the world without carrying this burden of being a bad person, right? And that's
Okay.
where healing kind of is begins, because that's where we can hold space. I can really hold space for what you made that mean about you and what it's doing to you with this belief.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you something. How do you approach it within the consultation, within the therapy session, when the emotion is so charged that it's very hard to even approach the topic to talk about it? Is there some way to distance the thinking from the emotion, the thoughts from the emotion, so that we can talk about what happened without like going deeper into the like depression? Depression can be a very pulling you down. Yeah, it can pull us down very much, and it can be like a whirlpool, like
Yeah.
that is hard to escape. So, is there some way to, from the outside, create some distance so that we can observe it and see what is feeding that whirlpool, so that we can calm it down, that we can later confront what is real, what is not?
Yeah, so when before we begin a session, we always ground, and so we bring a lot of awareness into the body, and so that we kind of bring in the concept of the witness or the observer, allowing them to observe and therefore set an intention, and then to look at, and then whatever emotion comes up, to allow the client to just witness it without any interpretation, and to give that a lot of space, and then we kind of go in, because by then we have activated some aspect of the witness. And sometimes it takes much longer for some clients than others to be in the body, so we titrate, we use breathing, we use you know space for even the client to completely, because a lot of what we are saying in trauma today is that depression is repressed emotion. And so a certain amount of that emotion needs to be, like you said, which is a charge, it needs to be discharged. It's because it was, the charge is still in there and it wasn't expressed or processed or had a voice or anything like that, something as small as help. Sometimes that's what clients will say, help, I need help. But they couldn't ask for it at that point of time. And that has been this suppressed for a really long time. But every time they see something, they fall into, say, helplessness, but they don't know how to ask for help, and then their body goes into panic. And that allows that part to actually speak, the emotions speak, to allow us to interpret, okay, there was a time when they needed real help and it wasn't available.
Right.
And that's it. And then you hold
Yeah,
space.
this is when we as parents to children say sometimes, don't cry, don't cry, when they are feeling emotional. And how often do we hear this? No, the mother or the father like, oh, come on, don't cry, don't cry, trying to soothe. And I understand where it comes from, but it's actually repressing that emotion rather than expressing it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Somewhere you're saying emotion is wrong or it's not okay to cry. When, I mean, from what I understand, I think even from yogic perspective, that every charge needs a discharge, everything needs to be eliminated, which is uh, why we have, for example, our bladders and our rectum to eliminate and discharge waste. And one way that emotions are discharged is through tears. An interpretation of frustration or sadness, even joy, uh, and we are saying don't cry or there's nothing to cry about, then you're invalidating the experience of the individual. And the person and the child may say, okay, fine, then I won't come back and say something. And then that becomes repressed, and I learn emotional numbing and different ways to invalidate my sense of feeling. And coming back to what you said in the beginning, that's when this whole emotional and thought entanglement, unholy alliance becomes a lot more complicated, um, and sort of giving us sometimes even wrong signals in terms of feeling fear where there may not be, or feeling danger because now it's wired in a certain way based on my understanding and interpretation of the event. Or if I was, every time I cried, for example, I was locked up in a bathroom. So now if I cry, then the first thing is like, okay, I can't cry. Right? Example, like I've seen, for example, clients who may say that it's not safe to cry, it's not okay to cry, like it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to express. And then what you're saying is, then you're pretty much living like a robot if you're not able to express emotion and intonation and really feel through what your felt sense is such an important aspect of being aware of sensations and our whole presence and wholeness. And being wholly present requires those senses, right? So when you said wake
Okay.
up, it is really about waking up from all of our senses and our consciousness and saying, I'm here, I'm present, and I'm not gone off into some fantasy. But then if that space is not, then it's easier to go into the fantasy than live in this emotional body that does not have an expression.
Okay. So you give a lot of emphasis to the expression side. Yeah.
Mhm.
I will share a little bit on the yogic perspective, which includes other aspects as well. And we were talking about the Unholy Alliance, thoughts and emotions. So from the yogic perspective, we have to talk about thoughts and we have to talk about emotions. In relationship to thoughts, we talked before how there is very little gap between when we think something and when we feel something, but there is a little bit of gap, and there is a way to cut it. When you have a thought that is a toxic thought that is not bringing you anywhere, that is going to feed that narrative of the victim or the shame or the I'm feeling unworthy or whatever all these things that you were describing, there is a way that you can just cut that thought before it becomes something deeper. So that would be something to be observant. You were talking about the observer, right? So one of the ways to apply the observant within me is to observe the thoughts. And if a thought is going to trigger this kind of pattern of feeling guilty or whatever this is going, whatever mental game is starting, you can cut it right there and not allow it to continue. Now, if it's a thought that we are happy to feed, then we can let it go and take it in and carry, and develop the thought and bring it into emotions and all that. So that's something to do with the thoughts. And I will teach later in a minute some tool from yoga on how to deal with thoughts. But then there is the emotion side, and you were giving a lot of emphasis to expression of emotions and the discharge of the emotional charge. And that's certainly one of the perspectives from yoga is that we need to express the emotions. But there is other two things that we can do with emotions, because most of the time, there's like two lines, and then I will mention a third line. One is that we often there's two things to do with an emotion. Either we contain it or we express it. Yeah? Either we contain it or we express it. And most of the time we get into trouble because we are containing an emotion that should be expressed, or we express an emotion that should be contained. So it's not just a matter of expressing. If we were just expressing emotions, we would be like babies, right? We, as adults, you could see an adult suddenly would feel angry and they would start, "Wah," and they was doing a tantrum. And it's like, part of becoming an adult means emotional maturity. And part of emotional maturity implies learning the right context, the right space and time, if you wish, where it's appropriate to just, allow your emotion to express itself. And through doing that, you can discharge it if you wish. So that is it's a good, that's part of wisdom, to know when to express what you have to express, when to contain what you need to contain. But containment is also really important. And to know the difference between containing and repressing. But it's not that every emotion has to be expressed. Some emotions need to be contained. I don't want to be going through life just expressing every emotion that I'm feeling within, because actually you see that quite often as well, that people are so self-centered in a way, and they are the center of the universe, so everybody has to pay attention to what they are going through. So if they're going through emotions, they're going to throw it in your face to let you know what's happening to them. And come on, emotional maturity, contain yourself. What is happening, deal with it. And I would say probably the containment and the expressing of how, when emotion comes, whether I contain it or express it, that's also going to vary with the gender, because we male tend much more to the containment, and some emotions more to the expression, but some are more to the containment. And let's say I'm a man, and I am experiencing some insecurity and some fear, maybe some deeper sadness. I will look for the moment to express that, and it will not be any regular situation. It will be maybe when I'm with my peers, some friends that I have, male friends, when we are all together, then I may express that fear, that insecurity, and we can talk about it. They can help me, support me. I don't feel so open to just go and express it with anybody. Yeah, there's going to be the right setting where you feel safe and you feel that you can share what is happening, which, by the way, is going to be the topic for next episode, no? The safety, reclaiming safety. No? I'm just trying to bring a connection to what's coming next. But I will look for that space in that context, and I will not express it anywhere else. And sometimes they say a lot about this in the movies. Any man who doesn't cry, well, men doesn't have to cry in public. They may cry in private. They may cry when they are with their male friends, and when it's the right context. So that's also, I believe, part of emotional maturity. And then there's a third thing, not just expressing and containing, but also transforming. Because when we are talking about charge is like an electrical charge. And electricity is in a form of energy. And in physics, they say energy is not created nor destroyed, but transformed. Now, when we are expressing that emotion, we are just throwing it out there. But is there a way to transform that energy within us? And there is. This is when in yoga, we talk about from emotion to devotion, from passion to compassion. Passion in the classical sense, like the passion of Christ, the pain, the suffering, yeah? So can you transform your suffering into compassion? Can you transform your emotion into devotion? So in part of this yogic path of healing, particularly trauma, and the consideration of karma, and karma always has a karam, a kind side. Yeah, karam is the kind side of karma, which is trying to teach us something. Is okay, something happened. You lose your father. Okay, you lose your mother. right? That happened. What do you receive out of that? No, that would be kind of like a reframing, and definitely what you were saying, like removing all the narrative that we create around that, like I'm not worth it, or I don't deserve love. That's why they abandoned me. All that for sure. That's our mind games. But then also like, okay, what am I trying to learn? What is my soul trying to tell me? Because we have to include it in that way. Otherwise, we are abandoning our soul, right? By not including the soul within the equation, no? So all right. So, what is my soul trying to tell me? Can I learn something from that? And taking all that suffering and maybe the emotions that are contained within that suffering, like in this case, probably be sadness, but maybe also anger. And can I utilize that energy to fuel my devotion, to fuel the zeal with which I'm going to pursue the spiritual path? So, that would be like the the yogic approach
Hmm.
to these things. So before I give my tip for today, do you want to interact with this, or do you want to say something in relation to what I said?
I think the containment, the expression, and the transformation, and how do you do that in a way, like you said, not everything needs to be expressed or contained, and containment is different from repression. Um, Today, what we understand, I think, with neuroscience, as they say, and Dr. Dan Siegel talks about it a lot, is that a lot of even expression is with myself recognizing and labeling that I am experiencing sadness and giving myself permission to allow myself to experience or feel that sadness. That's it. It doesn't mean expression of going and throwing it on anybody else. Some may be sharing, okay, Ardaas ji, thank you, but I'm noticing the sadness in me uh, that's showing up in this moment. And can I get a moment? Or, it's been when I heard you say X, it brought up emotion for me. And that's expression as well, but that's emotional maturity as you talked about it. And here it is acknowledging that I felt an emotion, acknowledging there is a presence of emotion. It doesn't even need to be always spoken, but at least to myself, I'm acknowledging that I'm feeling in this moment. Most will say, no, it's nothing, and then we're building it up and becoming resentful, and that's poison at the end of the day. When we aren't allow ourselves to acknowledge that we feel sadness, or we're feeling anger in this moment, or in this case, it's just even the expression of labeling it and letting myself know and holding space for myself and saying, hey, I'm experiencing anger in this moment, and I acknowledge it. And I think that's really the journey of going from numbing and repressing to this experience of emotional maturity as a journey of healing from trauma. Because otherwise, trauma can get triggered, and I'm just screaming, yelling, shouting. And the journey is, how do I go from there to able to recognize and hold space that, hey, right now I'm feeling overwhelmed. But normally I'll just feel overwhelmed, I wouldn't know what it is, and then it turns into a panic. And that's what we're dealing with when it comes to trauma, because there wasn't that holding, there wasn't that soothing, there wasn't that ability of the safety that was present. Again, we're reclaiming safety in our next conversation, but the foundation of that my nervous system is able to hold that, right? And I'm able to hold that space for myself to explore and feel. And if there's somebody else, if it's, I don't expect them to start rescuing me and saving me, but I can hold myself. And that's where I talk about the expression of it in a really in a manner of what it looks like when with healing, because most of the time we're actually denying what we're feeling.
Right. So I see that you're strengthening this, coming back to the idea of the observer, no? How I am feeling this, I am going through this, I am feeling this sadness or this anger or feeling overwhelmed, no? So it's like coming back to the experience of observing what is happening within from
Yeah,
that observer side.
and to take responsibility for it, because I think one of the aspects of emotional immaturity is blame and shame and all of that,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
along with the healing is the ability to take responsibility for my emotions and taking care of myself.
Correct. A responsibility, I would say that's one of the quintessential, the most one of the most essential ingredients to maturity
Yeah.
and also emotional maturity. So definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's when forgiveness and all the yummy things come into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's for, I guess, later. But over to you, Ardaas ji, to teach us today the yogic tip for emotions, I believe.
Yeah, let me just say one thing, because if we don't if we don't feel responsible for how we feel, if we say no, I'm feeling like this because they left me, or because they abandoned me, or because they whatever, you don't have any control over your feelings and your fantasies of what
Mhm.
happened, right? The imagination that you were creating, that narrative, and the moment you take responsibility for how you feel, okay, now that you're responsible, you can also change it. So that's the origin of being able to change your experience. But yeah, I wanted to give that tip for today. Today is a tip about the mind, about when the thought starts just before it becomes the feeling and the emotion. So before, in that gap, in that little gap between the thought originating and becoming something else. And that's when we detect one of these thoughts that are karmic thoughts, or like mind games. Yeah, these the victim, for example, like, oh, it always happens to me, or oh, nobody loves me, whatever is that phrase. That's something that I like to call the anti-mantra. It's like almost the opposite of mantra. But is today's tip is about this exactly, mantras. Because if you notice the word mantra and you turn it around, you have trauma. Trauma. Because man comes from the mind. And the tra could be a number of things in yoga. Tra can be like a trap.
Mm,
And sometimes we may experience that our mind is like a trap that entraps us, and it generates certain number of thoughts and emotions, like this unholy alliance, that trap us in a state from which is very hard to get out. And the opposite of this is mantra. Yeah, mantra, that's trauma, I would say. Mantra is something that traps the mind, or something that is going to protect us from the mind, yeah, by trapping it and traversing it. Yeah, traverse, to cross. So to cross through the mind, when the mind is creating an idea or a thought that is going to be toxic, it's going to take you to the same place that you know that is not healthy, then there is a way to cut it, and that's with the mantra. And for mantras, there's obviously many kinds of mantras, and you're very welcome to find one that it aligns with whatever your spiritual alignment is. So, for example, if you are a Muslim, you could say Allah or Allahu Akbar. And if you are a Christian, you could say something in connection with Jesus or with Mary or Alleluia. Or there's all these sacred words, let's say, can have the power to awaken the witness and cut through the mind and protect us from the mind, and protect your mind also from outside experiences and outside influences, because those negative thoughts that we often have, they don't necessarily come just from within. Sometimes they do, from the subconscious, and we don't notice where they come from. But sometimes they come from without. They come from the environment and the people around us thinking negative thoughts, and we pick them up, and then we think they are ours. But there is a way to protect your mind. So that's with mantra. So whether you detect a thought that you don't want to let it grow within you, or whether you want to protect your thoughts from whatever environment you are in, then mantra is the key. So let me just share a very basic classical one from yoga. That would be inhaling Ong, exhaling Sohang. Ong, Sohang. Sometimes it's just Sohang. Some people just do inhale So, exhale Hang. Or you can inhale Ong and exhale Sohang. And because the last weeks we were giving some tips connected to the breath, I think it makes sense that we can incorporate it now. We can include, as you do some long deep breaths, as you practicing long breathing that we were doing the last days, and moving the navel in the right way and so on. At the same time, you inhale long and exhale Sohang. And with the Sohang, You are letting go of whatever is like the thought comes, I'm not feeling worthy. No. Om Sohan. And then you let it go and you release that thought from your system through the breath and through the mantra. So the mantra creates this protective layer around your mind and also protect you, your witness, you, the witness, from whatever is happening in the mind. It does this double effect. So that's today's tip.
Thank you so much for that, Ardaas ji. I invite all our viewers and listeners to breathe in and breathe out and to use mantra, Ong Sohang being one, and anything else that may vibrate with you today. To invite you to try that out and let us know what your experience is so that we can move, transform, elevate, evolve from I'm not good enough or I'm bad to Ong Sohang, which is really vibrating with our wholeness and our compassion.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
You can also do it while somebody else is speaking. Like I was just doing it at the same time you were speaking, but I was also listening to you. So if you are in a conversation that is tough and is gonna trigger, you feel triggered or you feel that some emotions are bubbling up, as you do the breathing, the deep breathing, you can do the Om Sohang within, and at the same time, you can be listening to the other person, but it helps you to stay neutral and activate the witness without going into the general triggers that that create, the victim personality or whatever. So just to point this out as well.
Thank you for saying that because I just tried it while you were speaking and I could see the difference. So,
Yeah, yeah.
in just those few seconds. So, thank you so much for that, Ardash ji. And with that, we come to a close of episode 4. And we'll see you again next week. We will be talking about reclaiming safety. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Till next week. Well, this is being recorded, so I guess
I
it
guess we
can
can,
be cut.
yeah,
It
it
can
can
be
be cut.
cut whenever.
Yeah, I think Aditya's left us and gone. Abandoned us,
Oh
Ardash.
dear. Oh no.
Yeah. Oh,
It's very interesting, eh? This mantra trauma.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Hmm. How did you find today, Ardashji?
Yeah, good.
How do you feel? Are you feeling well?
Yeah. I'm okay. Just a little bit of runny nose. Yeah.
Thank you so much for continuing to do it in spite of everything that February has brought on.
Thank you too. It's a pleasure to do this, and it's good. I'm happy. When I sit in the diary, it's like, okay, today we are recording. Good. Let's go. One more step. Where are we going today?
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a conversation with Shiv in the channel as well. I invited him to have. I wanted to do a podcast with him, like the way we are doing, but
Mm-hmm.
with him. And we're gonna do a conversation, and then we will see from there if he feels that he would like to do it. It would be nice to do a similar format
Yeah. And
with
capture the wisdom, right?
yeah,
So, yeah.
to pull it out of him.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. How are
absolutely.
you feeling today about the podcast? How did it go?
I thought it went really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just starting trusting that whatever is meant to be here will be here.
Yeah, we are following the guideline, the scheme that we prepared quite closely. I think it makes sense. I think it's good that we dedicated that time to work on it.
Yeah.
Well, you put a lot of effort on it. I just gave you my suggestions, but I felt it is quite aligned. We can follow the path clearly. Like today at the very end, as I was speaking, I noticed, oh, safety, and I
Mhm.
noticed that was the thing for next week because I wasn't planning to introduce it, but then as I was speaking, it's like, oh yeah, so it means that everything is coherent and the process is quite linear, even though it's never linear, but it's quite clear that we move from one topic to the next. So that's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah. It's flowing beautifully, I think.
yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Ardaas Chief, for
Thank
everything.
you, Nyana.
Yeah.
All right. And happy Shiva. What was that?
Shivratri.
Shivaratri. Well, enjoy
Thank
it.
you, and same
May,
to
may
you.
your Kundalini come out
Rise
on that.
tonight. Yeah, I'm hoping that
Yes.
it does. I'm going to go and do some Adi Shakti
Good
mantra
idea.
when I go home.
Good idea.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye bye.
Sanam. Bye.
Satnam.
Sanam.